Today we are going to be talking about super fights in the UFC that never happened. I'm going to be talking about what I would like to see about them, my hype level for them, and I am going to be predicting every single one of these matchups. Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I'm your guy with too many YouTube channels. Let's get started. We have a list of fights over here for you. First off being Francis Ngannou versus Jon Jones. Now, I'm not going to lie to you guys. This is a little bit on the lower level of interest for me wanting to see super fights. I don't like Jon Jones and I don't like Francis Ngannou. And I know it's popular to dislike these two now, but I've always been a big hater of these two. Don't care to see them, don't care about them. And this would be an interesting matchup though, okay? And if you happen to follow the channel, I'm not going to break these fights down like I do with the full card breakdowns. You know, okay, this is what Jon Jones is good at and he's been on this win streak at this time in his career. I'm just going to be giving like a base level prediction for all of these. It's interesting because Jon Jones looked like crap at heavyweight. But we do know that he can absolutely exploit the ground game of Francis Ngannou. He is definitely a better wrestler, and he's big enough where he could take down Francis Ngannou. That technique is there. But with Francis Ngannou, you always have to worry about that initial blitz. But would Francis Ngannou, on the other hand, show up during the bout, and would he just kind of show up and be tentative, kind of like a Derek Lewis fight, because we know the takedown threat is there for Jon Jones? Would he go guns blazing forward? We don't know, okay? I'm inclined, while I do think that Jon Jones is very overrated as a heavyweight, he would lose to guys like Volkov, he would lose to guys like Blades, he would lose to guys like Tom Aspinall. I think that he would get past Francis Ngannou specifically just for that matchup. Don't care about this fight, but my pick is going to be Jon Jones, okay? Let's continue on to the next super fight, and apologies for the weird-looking picture over here for GSP. But we have Anderson Silva versus George St-Pierre. We actually got George St-Pierre and how he was looking at middleweight against Michael Bisping, and he surpassed every single one of my expectations, dude. I did not expect him to beat Michael Bisping. I lost money on Michael Bisping for that fight. I was like, Michael Bisping, he's going to be too much. He's going to be too big. He's taking on bigger guys, but that's before we knew about the lighter man's skill. So this is something that plays into a factor here. George St-Pierre, throughout his career, has taken on significantly better fighters than Anderson Silva. He actually has a very good record behind the guys that he's fought. Anderson Silva fought a lot of people who are, quite frankly, very overrated. So, yeah, when this fight was going to be booked, this was a prime for prime, and it's not like Jon Jones just going into heavyweight as like a little bit more of an old guy. I think this fight could be a little bit more of a 50-50. I can see GSP going towards Anderson Silva, taking him down, maybe having it look like a Chael Sonnen type version of a fight, but I could also see Anderson Silva having that reach on GSP. GSP not being able to land those jabs, those Superman punches. I think Anderson would get the better of the striking for sure, and he would definitely have the power advantage, but the technique advantage and the wrestling advantage goes to George St-Pierre. I think this is also a I think this is a very, very close fight, but if I was a betting man, I would say George St-Pierre. I like the way they looked at middleweight and Anderson Silva. I think he's always been a little bit overrated. George St-Pierre has taken on the who's who of the welterweight division for his era, so my pick for this fight is going to be George St-Pierre. This is a fight that I was dying to see back in the day. I'm not like particularly a fan of either two. Like I like GSP, but which is strange because I'm Canadian too. I'm not somebody who like goes crazy over George St-Pierre like Canadians typically do. Anderson's okay. I like George St-Pierre. I would be pretty hyped up for this fight. This was like one of the biggest matchups they could have made in UFC history. But my pick for this fight is going to be GSP, okay? Let's continue on to the next matchup. Brock Lesnar versus Fedor Emelianenko. I know this is something that a lot of people wanted to see. I'd personally rather see Fedor fight Kane. That would have been more fun. Or Fedor versus Daniel Cormier. That would have been awesome to see too, like in the UFC on the big stage, but Fedor was never able to come to the UFC. Guys, this is going to be a quick one. Fedor would ruin Brock Lesnar. And I'm not even one of those guys where it's like Fedor is the best heavyweight ever. I think Fedor would lose to Kane. We saw Fedor lose to Verdum. And I think that Fedor would lose to Stipe for sure. Okay? But Brock Lesnar, he's not good enough. He's not on Fedor's level. Fedor would absolutely brutalize Brock Lesnar. So Fedor is going to be a confident pick of mine and a fight that I would consider betting on. Let's continue on to the next super fight. Conor McGregor versus Jorge Masvidal. You know, I'm surprised that this fight never actually ended up getting booked. Both guys were at their absolute peak in stardom once these two were starting to like yap about. And Jorge Masvidal, fresh off the flying knee, had the sick tattoo coming into the fight. I think here's the thing, though, okay? Because we oftentimes talk about lighter man's skill. At what point, and I know we've seen Conor fight at 170, but he fought Nate Diaz at 170, okay? It's not like fighting a real welterweight. Nate Diaz is just a little bit fat. Would this be too much of a jump? Because I know we have the lighter man's skill. I know we have that, and Conor McGregor is the superior fighter to Jorge Masvidal, but at what point does size come into play? Would Jorge Masvidal be able to just throw Conor McGregor around? And I know that Jorge has also fought at lightweight, but he's really like filled into the welterweight division. Conor from featherweight to lightweight, excellent transition. The skill absolutely increased there. Would that be too much at welterweight? I'm inclined to say no. I think that he's just not much better than Jorge Masvidal, and we know that Masvidal's not going to take him down. Masvidal's definitely scrappy. He could get the better of Conor McGregor with some leg kicks. If a Conor McGregor showed up, that was a version of Conor McGregor against Khabib Nurmagomedov, which I guess would have been around that area. So yes, the spectacle and the great version of Conor McGregor would have showed up. I'd pick him to beat Jorge Masvidal. But with the idea knowing like it wouldn't shock me at all if Jorge Masvidal ended up just sleeping him. That wouldn't shock me one little bit. Jorge can get scrappy. Jorge would come forward and he'd not have to worry about a takedown. I think that Conor McGregor would more likely be piecing him up than vice versa. It's an excellent fight. I would have loved to see this fight back in the day. I was really, really, really hoping that we could see this because you had two actual superstars in the UFC. I'd love to see this, but Conor McGregor would be my pick for this matchup. Okay, let's continue on to the next super fight, one that never happened. Dominick Cruz versus Jose Aldo. You guys are going to hate me, man. You guys are going to hate me. And I'm so thankful for those of you in the comments because every once in a while I get some people that agree with me on this. I've always thought that Dominick Cruz is overrated. And this is coming from somebody who likes Dominick Cruz, okay? I've always thought he was overrated. I don't think the lighter man's skill would really come into play at this one because this would have been Dominick Cruz going up in the bantamweight division, taking on Jose Aldo. Both of them in their primes. Jose killing the entire division. Dominick Cruz, injury-free, taking on the toughest division in combat sports history. Sorry, my dog's doing something. Like these guys were in their peak when they were talking about having these two go at each other. Okay, when this conversations first started coming about. I would have loved to see this fight. This would have been my most anticipated super fights. Wouldn't it, Sonny baby? Wouldn't it? She's going to bother me for my recording now, eh? What are you doing, baby? What are you doing? What are you doing? Oh my god, an OBS lagged out. Sorry, I'll do a jump cut. But anyways, as I was saying, these two prime for prime, they are excellent fighters. And I know a lot of people might see, and a lot of people were talking about this back in the way, like there's no way Dominick Cruz's movement went like, he's undefeatable with the way he moves around. You know what I see? I see Jose Aldo chopping the hell out of his legs. That was always a weakness of Dominick Cruz, and people just didn't expose that. I think Jose Aldo would absolutely dummy Dominick Cruz in a bout. Yeah, he might be able to move around for a couple minutes, but he would catch him. I think Jose would catch him. He's one of the best and most underrated strikers in UFC history. I think this would be a domination on the side of Jose Aldo, and this is a fight that I would bet on, for sure. For sure. It's an excellent matchup for Jose Aldo. And again, it's coming from a guy who likes Cruz. I've just always thought he was a little bit overrated, but I would really, really look forward to that super fight, okay? Let's continue on to another fight. This is one that I think I would like to see most out of all of the super fights. Demetrious Johnson versus TJ Dillashaw. Two of the greatest fighters of all time in their primes. Champion versus champion. And obviously, with how TJ looked at the 125 cut, we would be talking about Demetrious Johnson moving up to the 135 division. I have no idea who would win this fight. You have two of, again, the greatest fighters in UFC history fighting in the toughest division in combat sports history, on top of the world, incredible win streaks, taking out amazing opponents, both of them with a beyond well-rounded skill set. Like, they are a master of a craft at every single martial art. I don't know who would win this. Not a clue. Not a clue. I think this is about as 50-50 as you get, and that's why I would be so much more excited to watch this fight than any other fight. If you had a gun to my head, I'd say TJ Dillashaw. And I know, I keep saying Letterman's skill, but I think I've picked against oh no, I've picked Conor McGregor, okay? I was about to say, I think I've picked the bigger guy every single time, but man, this would be a hell of a fight, and I'd love to know what you guys think about it, okay? Let's continue on to the next super fight, Daniel Cormier versus Brock Lesnar. Unfortunately, guys, this, like I mentioned about Brock Lesnar versus Fedor Emelianenko, this wouldn't even be a fight. I'd be interested in this fight. It would have some pretty fun build-up. I would imagine the trash talk would be pretty fun. But Daniel Cormier would do whatever he wanted to Brock Lesnar. He would do whatever he wanted. And it won't even be a fight. Daniel Cormier would be lock of the year if they ever ended up fighting. Brock Lesnar wouldn't even have a puncher's chance. Daniel Cormier would ruin him. It would be an exciting fight. And I'm actually a little surprised that it never happened. I don't care. And I forgot to mention, too, it would have been Daniel Cormier in a state where Daniel Cormier is old. Same with Brock Lesnar. That wouldn't even be a fight, man. Let's continue on to the next super fight over here. Jon Jones versus Israel Adesanya. Jon Jones not being old, and Israel Adesanya being in his prime. Israel Adesanya would have moved up to the 205-pound division. Of course, we all know how Jon Jones performs at 205 very well. Israel Adesanya, he didn't really perform all that well at 205. But I also think that Jan was a little bit of a tough matchup for him. I think this would be a chess match of a striking match. I don't know who would have more reach. I would imagine it's Jon Jones. But Israel Adesanya was a lot better in his prime than he is, obviously. But Israel Adesanya was a lot better in his prime. When we were talking about the super fight with Jon Jones, Israel Adesanya was a killer in that division. I don't know who would get the better of the striking. But guys, and oh no, I'm doing it again. I'd have to go with Jon Jones, obviously for PED use, and Jon Jones has that ground game option. Something that we know could be exposed with Israel Adesanya and was exposed at the bigger weight class. I could see Jon Jones, if he were to take a wrestling approach, which Jon Jones typically is a smart fighter, but then again, you also have to take into consideration that Jon does this stupid thing. Well, is it really stupid because he's won all of his fights? Where he wants to get the better of you at your own craft. So I could see Jon Jones wanting to style and knock out Israel Adesanya. I could see him wanting to land those spinning elbows. You know? I could see him wanting to have that flash KO on Israel Adesanya because that's what Israel Adesanya does to other people. You get what I'm saying over there? So Jon Jones might not even take the wrestling approach. And I just realized what my dog's doing in the background there, guys. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do, but this would be a fight that I would be so excited to see. More so than most of them, but definitely there's a couple fights that we talked about that I'd be more excited for just purely for the matchup. The build-up for this fight would be insanely fun. This would take over the entire world. This would be one of the biggest fights that you could possibly make ever. But I would pick Jon Jones to beat Israel Adesanya. I think the weight would be a lot. Plus, seeing Israel Adesanya losing to Jan Blachowicz at 205, I think he would also lose to Jon Jones. The only chance that Izzy would have is if Jon Jones wants to pull like what he did with Chael Sonnen. He's like, I'm going to beat up the wrestler by using wrestling. That's something that you have to take into consideration. But then again, Jon Jones is just better than everybody. So would it even matter if he did that? I don't know. But this would be a big fight, and I would pick Jon Jones to win in this matchup. Now, guys, speaking of like a bunch of just different fighters and fun fights just like this, a little while ago I uploaded a video talking about my favorite fighters of all time. You can watch this video here if you are new to the channel. If you want to check out what I have to yap about why my favorite fighters are my favorite fighters, you can check them out right there. I'd love to have you over there. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, everybody.